Hello, hello, Endo sisters. Thank you so much for joining us once again for K&K Real Talk. And we are so excited about this episode because we are actually chatting with one of the admins for Nancy's Nook. And that is Sally Sorrell. Hi, Sally. I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Hi, everybody.
It's so lovely to be here with you. If you're not familiar with me, if this is your very first episode, I am Kenny King, holistic health and wellness coach focused on assisting women with endometriosis thrive. So, Sally, I'm so glad. So I just have to say, first, thank you so much for doing this and being here with us. And Nancy's Nook is like this phenomenal resource. I am just so impressed. Over 43,000 members at this point, and she's been building this all on her own. And so for those who are not familiar with Nancy's Nook yet, would you mind sharing a bit about the mission of the group and Nancy's inspiration to start it?
Nancy Peterson is the original endo advocate. She was diagnosed in the early 60s. I'm sure she suffered longer than that. And she went through her whole life with endometriosis and really battling and experiencing bad care and experiencing really great care. And her mission is to have an online, completely accessible Facebook group and beyond, because the Nook reaches sort of everywhere, where women through self-directed learning can learn best quality practice in endometriosis care and then advocate themselves and make decisions about what they want for their care, for their bodies.
Yeah, that is so amazing. I love the self-directed research and that aspect of independence, because I'm sure you've seen this. We see it time and again, not just with endometriosis, but almost every chronic illness, where sometimes when experiencing either, what's the best word? I don't, maybe bad or poor care, like medical care, where our voices aren't being heard or we're not being listened to. Sometimes I know for me personally, there was a point where I sort of gave up on asking for anybody to listen, and just kind of went out on my own. I felt completely alone. And I'm certain that Nancy did too, and so many women did too. So it's such a beautiful thing that she's created this massive library of resources and that beacon of advocating for yourself, because we do have so much power. We do get to advocate for ourselves, and that's just so amazing. That mission is so beautiful and inspiring and amazing. And let me ask you, what brought you and inspired you into becoming an admin for Nancy's Nook?
Well, let's see. So I was diagnosed with endometriosis when I was 35 years old. And so I had endometriosis and endometriosis pain since I was 13, really. Most of my early pain was stomach aches and IBS and really having bad food allergies and bloating. And I never connected that my period cramps were connected to the bloating and the stomach discomfort, because we're told that cramping and bleeding and clotting, that's all normal. So when I arrived at the diagnosis of endometriosis, I also realized that I had medical license. I'm a pelvic physical therapist, and I was even then. And even with my pelvic physical therapy license, diagnosis took more than 10 years. It took close to 15 years from my onset of symptoms. And that story is not unique. Our women really, really feel that. And I'm a woman of means who can access. I'm from a family in medicine. I'm in medicine. And it's just like, could you imagine being alone and not knowing where to go, not knowing what to do? And I wanted to take my medical license and change that. And so originally we were with the Endometriosis Research Center, the ERC. When that group closed for legal reasons, Nancy said that she she had to spread the word on what modern concepts of endometriosis were, and she started Nancy's Nook. And Nancy has a personality for Nancy's Nook, because we're not going to spoon feed it to you. We're not going to say, hey, here's what you have to do. It's a self-directed learning, and it's not a place to have a pity party. You have a question, we will help you, but we're not going to there are other groups where you can get emotional support. But Nancy's Nook is a place to learn about what works in endometriosis care, what doesn't work in endometriosis care, what are associated conditions with endometriosis, how do I access care for endometriosis, how do I advocate for myself, and to also give you the confidence that when you walk into a doctor's office and say, I've heard about excision, endometriosis is likely not from retrograde menstruation, it's laid down in utero, how do I further myself? That you know that you have a 43,000 person research-oriented group backing you, and that you're not this little tiny voice that sounds like a crazy person. And we hear the stories in the Nook all the time that people don't listen when they advocate for themselves, but we're here to push you further and to give you the tools. Now, you don't have to take them, but to give you the tools if you choose to go the route of advocating for yourself. And so that's everything that I wanted when I got involved, because my goal as a healthcare practitioner and my goal as a woman with endometriosis is that no one should live this life, and that if you're going to want to make a difference, you're going to have to do it for yourself.
Yes, absolutely. I completely and wholeheartedly agree. And I think that's why so many of us are in this space of helping women take the reins, choose to advocate for themselves and educate themselves and try things and speak up. And I just love that being a part of the mission. And I appreciate you sharing that with us, that was such a big piece of you being an admin and joining in. And one of the things that I love is Nancy's bio, getting to read her bio and get an idea of who she really is. And so I know you were planning on sharing that with us, and just for everybody viewing, Sally's going to read that for us, because it's in Nancy's words, and it's just really coming from that place of her, and so that you get to know really who she is in her own words. So I'd love to hear that.
Before I read it, I just want to say, like, when you're in the Nook, we have all been there, all of the admins. We've all been exactly where you are as a woman, as a person with endometriosis. We've all been exactly where you are. And to know and to understand where Nancy started and how far she's come, it really gives you that connection that this is a safe place for you to be learning in. So it's just a huge honor to read her bio. Oh, great. So here we go. So this is in Nancy's own words. I had a HIS at age 28 or so after some 17 years of pain and ruptured cysts. At that time, in addition to overwhelming fatigue, chronic anemia, I can do it, chronic anemia, severe period and ovulation pain, and back and leg pain, my career was threatened. So I opted for a total hysterectomy. It was 1969, folks. We thought it was a cure. After 6 weeks, the back and leg pain did not resolve. So my ortho recommended a laminectomy and a fusion. So I had one of those too. For the next 22 years, I had increasing back and leg pain to the point where I was only sleeping 2 hours a night in 20-minute intervals. Yet I worked as a nursing supervisor and spent most of my time off trying to get enough rest to go back to work. This is Nancy's life. One night, I got a call from the OR that a crew doing emergency surgery did not get away for dinner and were not likely to get a break for hours. Supervisors cover all kinds of things, and in those days, the cafeteria closed at 6 p.m. So off to the kitchen to fix dinners and send via the dumbwaiter up to the OR. When I finished, I sat with a cup of coffee to take the pressure off my leg. In the cafeteria, Dr. David Redwine just happened to be giving a lecture on his early research findings to a group of women from the community who had endometriosis. I think this was 1984. I sat through part of the lecture before being called to the ER to back up the trauma team, but I had that once, so I thought his ideas were interesting. Over the next year, his work came to mind periodically, and one night I bumped into him while making the rounds in OB. I asked him how his research was coming along, and he indicated it had undergone peer review and was accepted for publication. At the time, I was co-chair of the hospital's research and development team, so I asked him to present his work there. They had him do it in the same to hospital administration. What came of that was a commitment from me and the hospital to develop the first minimally invasive excision program for endometriosis with Dr. David Redwine. I began lecturing to support groups on modern concepts, the essence of his research, around the US and Canada, women's health healing groups, and occasionally an NP group. I co-wrote an article called Endometriosis Reconsidered with Bobby Hasselbring in a magazine called Medical Self-Care. While that magazine only had a circulation of 60K, it precipitated 1,000 phone calls when it hit the streets. Over the next few years, while lecturing, I would often stay late answering questions when the lecture was over. As I listened to people's comments, questions, and histories, I kept thinking to myself, gee, that sounds like me. I still was having severe leg, back, and bowel pain, but did not have a clue why, since neither surgery 22 years before had helped. Eventually, I got up the courage to make an appointment with Dr. Redwine, him not knowing I had endo before at all. I suspect he thought, oh, brother. But when he was done with the exam, he noticed nodularity on the uteral sacral ligaments and pelvic pain on exam. I was going to surgery for removal of my gallbladder and asked him to do the endo surgery at the same time. It took 2.5 hours to remove the endo, and I awoke in the recovery room with my back and leg pain gone. I had been attending medical meetings for 5 years at that point and got to know Bob Albee during that time. In 1989 or so, we discussed a program in Atlanta. At the same time, I was president of the National Women's Health Group, where Jan Hanks, the director of women's services at Dr. Albee's hospital, was also a member, and we discussed a program there. I did a brief consult to help the hospital understand the importance of minimally invasive surgery and how the work of modern concepts had changed much of our understanding of endometriosis. They were looking for a program director. During my lectures to support groups, I had crossed paths and became friends with Donna Law, remembering her for the program director. Meanwhile, unrelated to endo, my thoracic spine gave out under the rigors of traveling 22 to 25 weeks of the year, and I retired, but had met Heather Guidone online in AOL's health chat on endometriosis. She and Michelle Marvel started the ERC and asked me to join their advisory board, which I did. But after retirement, I went silent for a while until Heather dragged me kicking and screaming back into the field in about 2000. So it became a purpose-driven life accidentally for the last 33 years, despite a different career before that. The commitment has been, if one person gets relief by the understanding of modern concepts, then is worth any effort the admins and I put forth. My mantra has been, never doubt that a few thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And that's by Margaret Mead. I am honored to work with a great group of committed women who deeply care about the journey for endometriosis patients and the journey they must travel. And this is Nancy Peterson, and she's amazing.
Oh my goodness, what an inspiring, process and story. And that piece about just sort of accidental,
Yeah.
sometimes we go through these journeys and later down the road we realize how much telling our story and doing the work that we know we were meant to do in this world can really impact change. And that's what is so inspiring about Nancy being so open with her story and creating this space of Nancy's Nook is such a it's such a giving space. There's so much information and so many resources, and that's just I'm grateful to her. I of course wish I'd found Nancy's Nook sooner. But it's so amazing, and that's why we want to share this with more and more women, because I still see it all the time in other groups, women getting newly diagnosed and they have no idea what to do, and they're, or they're still not being heard by their physicians. And so while you shared some about how Nancy's Nook is different, how it's self-directed, and how we're not going to hold your hand, but we are going to answer your question. And here's all these resources. Could you share just a little bit more about how best to use and navigate the group?
So the best way to navigate the group is to join the group, we give you 3 questions. And then once you've answered those 3 questions, we give you about a week to go through every single item in the files section. We just talked a little bit about Nancy's desire to teach everybody the modern concepts of endometriosis. Here's the difference. We used to think for a long time, or other people thought, I never really thought that, but we used to think for a long time that endometriosis occurred from retrograde menstruation, or endometriosis was a disease that came from backflow of blood out of a little tiny hole in the tube, and that every time you got your period, you grew endometriosis. Modern concepts of endometriosis started by Dr. Redwine and continued by the likes of Dr. Bott and Dr. Martin and many, many other doctors says that's complete insanity, because every woman has retrograde menstruation and not every woman has endometriosis. And we have tried things like, and Nancy's a perfect example. Nancy had a hysterectomy, but she still had horrible endometriosis. So it couldn't have been from the uterus, and it couldn't have been from backflow of blood through the tube, because she still had pain, and it had nothing to do with her period. She wasn't even getting a period anymore. And yet 22 years later, Dr. Redwine found endometriosis in her. And I hear that story every single day, whether it's 22 years later or it's 6 months later. So they give you Lupron, or they give you Orlissa, which is now the new drug that has not the greatest side effects. And what is it really doing for you? It's just stopping your period. It's not actually changing the presence of endometriosis in your body, nor is burning off the top of that disease, because burning off the top of the disease leaves the disease behind at its root. In modern concepts of endometriosis, what we believe is that endometriosis lays down when you're in utero. So when you're inside the mommy's belly, there's actually something that we don't understand, and endometriosis gets laid down, and then it becomes hormonally reactive as you develop. And the only way to really, or one of the best ways to deal with it, is to take the disease out at its root. That's excision. To deal with the pain associated with it, there can be pain left behind. You can have central nervous system disorders. You could have pelvic floor muscle spasms. You could have IC. You could have a female hernia. There's a lot of things that go along with pelvic pain. And so our goal in the Nook is to help you understand that when your doctor says, let me put you on birth control to stop your periods, that's not really going to do very much for your endometriosis. Let me put you on Orlissa, because that'll fix everything, to make you understand, and for you to read the current research to make you understand that while it's a choice and you can choose what you want to choose, that likely isn't going to do much for the root of the disease and possibly the source of the pain. And that Lupron itself may not actually do anything for the disease. And what we really don't want you to do is to have a hysterectomy for endometriosis and leave the disease behind, thinking, well, if I don't bleed, I won't have the disease. There is an indication for hysterectomy in adenomyosis, which is endometriosis lodged in the walls of the uterus. Some women have terrible battles with that. There is women with fibroids occasionally will need hysterectomy. There are a number of pelvic pain disorders and diseases in which a hysterectomy is indicated. But endometriosis itself, despite what more than half, I would say 90% of the gynecologists in the United States say, it's not going to do anything for your endometriosis. And so we want you to understand that, to go through the files, to read everything, to listen to the stories that go on, to look at the comments and to look at the posts and to connect with them and to find yourself in them a little bit and realize, hey, this is a good decision, or this isn't a good decision, or this is the decision that I could be making. How could I access care? What could be best for me? That's what we mean by self-directed learning. We're not going to spoon feed it. It's almost like, you coach clients. So do I. I coach as well, but you can't spoon feed or tell someone what to do. You can't browbeat them. You have to let them connect to you, connect to your story, and connect to what's going on, and do that with education. And that's what we do there in the Nook.
Absolutely, yes. And so once you become a group member, taking that first 7 days before commenting to really go through the files in the file section. And there's also, of course, the search feature, so that if you're looking for something in particular, you can search as well, to get a foundation of education there, so that the women who are in that group are able to make the decisions that they feel the most comfortable with regarding their medical care, and advocate them for themselves and what they want. And yeah, I just love that it's amazing. I will tell you, when I first got on Nancy's Nook and saw the number of files, as amazing as it is, it can be a little overwhelming those first couple of days when you're looking at all of that. But what I love is this is all evidence-based research.
Right.
Yeah, and it's so important to have
evidence-based as we could be, because that we don't understand the cause of endometriosis yet. We understand more likely what endometriosis isn't than what it is. But we do know that the gold standard of care should be excision at this point.
Yes, absolutely. And that makes perfect sense. It's what sets it apart is it's just not random articles coming from all sorts of directions. They're definitely they're filtered more than what you might get in a different place.
Our admin, so Nancy is a retired nurse, as you just heard her bio. We have 1, 2, 3, at least 3 other nurses, if not 4. I'm a pelvic physical therapist, so in the Nook, I'm the person who answers all the other questions about, could I have pelvic floor dysfunction? Could I have IC? What is IC? What is a cold hernia? What is pudendal neuralgia? My PT did this. How can I help her? So that's my role. And then we have somebody that specializes in health informatics, who's also a nurse. We have a nutritionist, and we have an amazing woman who's been through the battle themselves. And in order to be a Nook admin, everybody there has to have been through the battle themselves. And so the way that we moderate the group is each from the perspective of where we come from in life. And I think that makes a huge difference, because we're not a group, someone who just had the disease. For the most part, we're of people who battled, went through, and didn't find one thing needed. I just finished my 6th surgery in July, and it was rough. But I needed to treat those other causes of pain also surgically. It wasn't do excision and poof, you're done. And most of the admins really, really understand that. They've done insurance appeals. They've done all the good things that you need to learn how to do. And they've also been, for me, I live in an area where I have access to multiple excisionists, but I had insurance where I couldn't access anyone.
Mhm.
And so I've been through that, but we have women that want to access specialists that live in Canada, but they want specialists in the United States that are better quality excisionists. We have someone that's an admin who is who had to work the TRICARE system because she was a veteran. We have a little bit of everything. People that were really, really limited and they're by insurance and by location, which is really hard because and needed to learn and walk the walk. So the Nook can really teach you how to do those kinds of things too.
Yes, absolutely. And that brings me to my next question. For our listeners who really aren't familiar, can you share a bit about the difference between a regular OB and a Nook doctor or endometriosis specialist?
Okay, so we talked about how endometriosis is not laid down through retrograde menstruation, but rather it emerges when you're in utero. And that's the modern concept that it's there your whole life and becomes hormonally reactive. So, our goal in the Nook is to start with excision surgery. So, there's two types of surgery. One is excision, and actually there's multiple kinds of surgery, but one is usually excision, where they dive down and they take every little nook and cranny off at the base, and the other they burn off the top of the disease, or they ablate it off with something that looks like a flamethrower and causes all this waste and estrus in your system, and takes about 20 minutes. Excision itself can take anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. My last excision was 5 hours. And so the goal is to use excision because excision gives the best bet of no recurrent operations for endometriosis. You may need an operation for something else, but you shouldn't have a true recurrence of disease. And if you do, it's typically not in the area where the disease was before. So what makes the Nook difference from a Nook specialist different from a regular OBGYN is, in medical school, medical students get an average of 20 minutes of OBGYN care that may include a couple sentences on endometriosis, right? Shocking. 20 minutes. 20 minutes on a disease that 1 in 10 women have. 1 in 10, and you're only at most talking about it for 20 minutes. Then in residency, doctors that want to choose to go into OBGYN, they only get to learn usually ablation or cautery, that burning it off at the top to deal with endometriosis. So you've left the whole disease behind. And the standard of care says, well, you do this ablation and then you stop their periods, be it through Lupron or anything else. So that's not good either, because we've discussed endometriosis has kind of not that much to do with its origin, probably not that much to do with your period. So, and this is the average OBGYN. This is what they get. A Nook specialist or an excision specialist typically goes on to do a minimally invasive surgery fellowship in endometriosis. And it's a higher level of specialty where they have to learn how to take the endometriosis off of the ureters, off of the nerves, off of the hypogastric plexus, from the outside of the bladder, from the bowel, because so many women with endometriosis have bowel endometriosis. They have to learn how to get it off of the sciatic notch if it needs to come off of there. They have to know how to take it off of the diaphragm, because women can have pain when they breathe during their period. And they have to know how to work very, very delicately to do that. In order to learn how to do that, it's training above and beyond OBGYN training. OBGYN training in the United States, you're really just learning how to ablate off the disease. You're not learning how to dive down at the root and do excision. So I forget the numbers exactly, but I think it's something like, I think there are 30,000 OBGYNs in the United States. And of those 30,000 OBGYNs in the United States, 143 of them are trained in excision.
Mhm.
So look at the difference. That's very, very, very big difference. And in the Nook, we try to teach you how to ask the questions that find out if your doctor is capable of doing this, but we also vet a list of specialists who are capable of it. So that's what makes glands and Nook specialists very different.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was so informative. And that's what I love is that there's that list that in the files you can go in and see the list of specialists. That way you can look, any endo sister can look in her area and see how close is a specialist to me. And I've seen so many travel. They'll travel 6 hours or 12 hours so that they can get the care, the level of care that they need with somebody who has that extensive training and can get in there and get the job done per se, with expertise.
Well, and we also teach in the Nook that it's not only about excision, but it's about it's following through on care. So if you need to treat your bladder because so many women have the evil twins of pelvic pain, which is IC and endometriosis, then we need to treat your bladder. If we need to treat your nerves and your pelvic floor, we send you to a pelvic physical therapist. We do not operate a list of pelvic physical therapists because we're the admins and we need to sleep sometimes. And but we do try to walk you through that surgery is not a quick fix, but if you don't take out that major driver of the pain, that you're not going to make a lot of headway. And so, and we come under fire for that a lot of times because people think surgery and then you're done and you're magically fixed, but it takes more than that sometimes. And sometimes it takes more than treating one disease. If you have Ehlers-Danlos, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, if you have, but you have to understand endometriosis drives its own pain. It's laid down when you're in utero. It's not tissue from the lining of the uterus. It's tissue similar to the lining as the uterus. And we have to deal with that with the respect that it deserves. And right now that is excision surgery.
Absolutely. I love how you put that, dealing with it with the respect that it deserves, because I think so many want that magic fix. Like, oh, I do this thing one time and then magically everything is better or everything is different.
It's National Dog Day, by the way.
That's my little cash.
I will also say in our group, while we don't discuss diet, there is a separate diet group that people use. But if your body has been assaulted for an average of 8 to 10 years by a disease, it's never going to be a magic fix. But the change and the difference when the disease is removed is unbelievable. Like, I can tell you, I had terrible back pain and I was a physical therapist. So I flew all over the country trying to fix the back pain. And the day they took out the nodular disease in my uterosacral ligaments, I just.
Oh, Sally, I think we froze. Sorry about that, guys. Give me just a second to get Sally back here. Sally, I think we froze on that.
Oh, but it was so good.
Oh, you were saying right at that part where you were saying as it got removed and that difference. Can you remember what you said?
Yeah, I do. So I can say that when the nodular uterosacral endometriosis was removed from my back, it was removed from the uterosacral ligaments and my back pain stopped instantaneously. And I was standing for fun in the post-op room. And I couldn't believe, and I'm a physical therapist, I know the ins and outs of back pain, like I could do it with my eyes closed, a back pain, but the difference was unbelievable. Plus, when I did want to sit, I could sit fine because I wasn't banging my whole body against the disease in the rectovaginal septum. And if you really want to talk about, there was a huge difference in sex because women shouldn't just accept that sex is going to hurt, because really excising and doing a true excision of the endometriosis can change your sex life forever. And you just have to understand that in the Nook, our goal is to let you understand that you deserve better and how to go and get it. And we really try to inspire each and every member in there that concept that you do deserve better, and you're going to have to find a doctor that's going to believe in you and go through this journey with you.
Absolutely. Yes. It's something that I say a lot in my group as well, is better is always possible. It's, are we willing to continue
Love it.
to strive for better? Because as you mentioned, like diet, nutrition and lifestyle and wellness, they all play a role. It's not like one should replace other. Everybody has their unique balance of what makes sense for their bodies, but what we're eating and the amount of stress we're in and the, our body's ability to operate the best that we can help them operate allows for a better quality of life. And we can continue to strive for that, to strive for better. And I 100% agree. Women deserve better and sex does not have to be painful. What was that?
Women do not have to experience painful sex, and they should not be 35 before they realize that sex does not have to be painful.
Absolutely.
But sex doesn't have to be painful. Women with endometriosis lose on average 11 hours of productivity at work. So work does not have to be painful. If you're able to, women should be able to choose whether or not they want to have a child. It shouldn't be a choice made by their bodies. It shouldn't be painful to be a mother. It shouldn't be painful to stay awake. None of it should be painful. We should just be able to go through life, not living on what's left over. We should be able to make our own choices. And we try to teach that at the Nook.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I just can't even say. You're like speaking my love language right now completely. So I want to ask you, what is one thing that Nancy wishes women with endo knew?
Okay, so let me pull that up. She sent a response. It didn't, we had it all set up so it would be so perfect, but then, all right. Nancy Peterson, founder of Nancy's Nook on Facebook, she answers, what would women like to know? She answers us, things I wish patients knew would be that the state of the art in care is not well established among physicians, and best outcomes come from patients educating themselves on the skills necessary to treat the disease effectively before making treatment decisions. We want you to educate yourself on modern concepts in endometriosis and to understand what's going on before you walk into your doctor's office. And I personally can say, I think Nancy saved my life this fall because she's taught me the concept of vote with your feet. And if you're not being respected, and if the modern concepts are not being respected, and if the doctor only wants to do a hysterectomy or only wants to prescribe Lupron or only wants to prescribe Orilissa, and they're not hearing you and they're not listening to you, the door is there and you can walk through it. And that's, even though I had been treated by a specialist for years, I did walk through that door and I did find a new specialist who understood. And that's what we're asking all of you to understand, is that option to vote with your feet is there. And if you want best quality care, you're going to have to advocate for yourself.
Absolutely. Vote with your feet. That's
what Nancy's saying. Vote with your feet. And as I was like, I had a little tussle with the doctor, and the doctor wasn't listening to me because I had something not caused by my uterus. And they just kept saying, we'll take out your uterus, we'll take out your uterus. And I kept saying, but the defect is like on the nerve. Like, how does taking out my uterus fix the nerve? And then like, in my head, I kept hearing, vote with your feet, vote with your feet, vote with your feet, vote with your feet. And I just opened the door and walked out. And it's true. Now, me how to do that. And she teaches 43,000 people how to do that and how to find care and how to be a success story and how to live, if you're not a success story, how to keep getting through it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I had a similar situation with that recently where I decided, well, I guess I need a new doctor because I'm very adamant about certain aspects of care that don't work for my body. And my doctor, said, you're going to be on birth control for the rest of your life. I want you on it indefinitely. And my body and birth control are not friend. They're just, they don't go together. They're not friends. It doesn't work for me. And actually it you know, makes
Makes
me
you
worse.
work.
Yeah, it makes me worse. So that was not something, but because she was so adamant about not listening to any of my desires and actually really like laughing me off.
That's what happened to me. Except I have the benefit of hearing Nancy say 20 times a day, vote with your feet, vote with your feet. But
Yeah.
that it is a horrible situation. You felt minimized.
Yeah. And I never went back. I mean, she was, I was like, well, you're fired. I didn't say it like that. That wasn't the way I expressed it, but I made it clear that it was really important to me that I found a physician who was in full support of going on the journey with me instead of it, slapping band-aids on symptoms. Um, and
And
so,
that's what it is. It's going on the journey with you. So I was in one of the better excision offices in the country, and I still realized these people weren't going to go on the journey with me. They were going to hack out my uterus, whether I had adenomyosis or not. They didn't really care that the pain was on the nerves. They were just like, whoops, you're a woman, you're over 40, take it out. And they weren't going to hear that I didn't want birth control. They weren't going to hear that I didn't want Lupron, and they weren't going to go on the journey with me. So I love that you're teaching women to go on the journey.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's hard in the beginning, especially for our women who are 18, 19, 20. They're just getting this diagnosis, or mothers of a 14-year-old who they're seeing these things happen. And so I think part of the message here is, from both of our ends, is as uncomfortable as it might feel in the moment, advocating for yourself. You are worth that, and it's one of the most important things you can do for your health, your life, your healthcare, and your endometriosis journey.
I love you. That's exactly true. It's one of the most important things you could ever do. Look, we could do a whole show on teens and endo, and hopefully we will one day, but teaching a teen that they're worth it and that the doctor isn't this all-knowing entity, and that's such a value to them. And even the Nook being able to teach the mothers and the teen that they're worth it is a huge thing, and a huge thing in your practice, a huge thing that I do with the pelvic physical therapy. And it's just a very powerful experience, because think of our lives if somebody had taught us that when we were 15 instead of 20 years later diagnosing us at 35.
Absolutely. And yes, I know, Sally, I'm just so grateful that you're here with us today. And I'm really looking forward to the future episodes that we'll do together, discussing specifically how the pelvic physical therapy comes into play, specifically how, teenagers can better have a voice for themselves, and how parents and teenagers can come together to get the care that they need. And I just really appreciate you representing Nancy's Nook today and being here with us and sharing this amazing, amazing information. It is so clear that you're passionate, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate you being here on our K&K Real Talk.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy there are others out there willing to share the journey with everybody else, because there's 176 million women who need to share that journey with each other. And it isn't until we do that that we're going to make real quality change for the future of endometriosis.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Thank you so much. And guys, for those of you, tuning in, thank you for being here with us. Sally will absolutely be here with us again in future episodes. And it's our goal to continue to bring you information, answer your questions, and talk about things that maybe you don't get to talk about. So as always, please reach out to myself or Kristen if you ever have a particular subject or topic you would love for us to tackle. And You can find me at Endometriosis Nourish, Flourish, Thrive. That is the closed group that works in conjunction with endometriosis and me. So we love you, and we look forward to seeing you next week.